Brad Sham. Dad, I'll let you bring Brad into the show.
Well, I'm happy to bring Brad in. He, whatever little bit I learned to do in broadcasting, Brad taught me. I drove Brad around, but I didn't always park where he wanted me to park, and sometimes we got towed in or something. But
you were Brad Cedric?
Well, I was Brad. I was kind of Brad. Brad said, "Wimp, you drive." Oh. And I got the call. I don't know what he said, but he was the boss, and I was the assistant. But I wasn't. I was way back in the background.
You know, every word of that is true except for the part that came out of your mouth.
Yeah. The only time he lies is when his mouth's moving.
He told me.
Yeah. Well, lie is such a harsh word. I think
I can tell you one thing. I may exaggerate a little bit, but he's absolute. There is absolutely none better. He is the absolute best. They all named the stadium after him. I mean, he is terrific. He's the voice of the Dallas Cowboys and a great friend. And I never bother him, try not to bother him much. But I thought, well, maybe he won't be as busy right now. And I appreciate you being on, Brad. How are you?
I'm doing great. And you're right. I'm not terribly busy. I'm actually supposed to be on vacation in Amsterdam today. So that obviously didn't happen. So. Here I am.
Well, Barry, my son's on with us. Mike McCarthy is taking over. Tell our listeners if there is a change, what you feel is going to be the change, and how things are going to change.
You know, we've only had a couple of opportunities since January to spend any time. When I say we, I mean all of us in the media, to spend any time with McCarthy, because he had a lot to do when he was hired the first week of January. And then, of course, the world closed down a couple of months later. And I think that some of the things that people were saying here about Jason Garrett were some of the things that people were saying a couple of years ago about Mike McCarthy in Green Bay. Obviously, he's an outstanding coach. And he's won a Super Bowl, and I don't think he's got anything to prove to anybody. And I'm very impressed with what he did with his year of 2019 off, where he just basically got some of his coaching friends, and they formed a kind of a shadow staff and went through everything you would do in a coaching week, looking at tape and refining concepts, and he also tried to improve as a person. And I think what part of the deal is, and you certainly know this, very, very rare exceptions aside, after a while, and especially in professional sports, the room needs a different voice. Yeah. Jason Garrett's a friend of mine, and I'm a believer in him. And he was in his job for 10 years, and they never got past the second round. Now, he's a much better football coach and head coach than I think most of his detractors would believe. But the facts are the facts, and he did not win on a big level. And so after a while, you know, in college, you'd get them for 4 years, and now, you know, maybe you get them for 1 or 2. And even though there's more mobility in the NFL than there used to be, you can be around guys 6, 7, 8, 9 years, and you know you don't get new stories. The stories are the same, and sometimes the room needs a new voice. I think that was probably true with McCarthy in Green Bay. I believe it was probably true with Garrett here, and I think for the Cowboys, with the roster that they have and the sense of urgency that they have to win a championship again, I think McCarthy was probably the best available hire they could have got.
Yeah, good thoughts there, Barry.
We're talking with Brad Sham, broadcaster of the Dallas Cowboys. Brad, obviously we're here in Tuscaloosa, and when Rex Ryan went out last week and said a lot of negative things about Amari Cooper, it made the hair stand up on our head, I guess, on our neck. You call him a turd, saying he quit on routes, all the different things. So Amari Cooper, from what we saw while he was here, was a guy who kept his mouth shut, worked extremely hard, played hard, never tried to show up anybody. Was that fair, what Rex Ryan did to Amari Cooper there on ESPN?
Now, I don't know Coach Ryan personally, Barry, and my opinion therefore, is just someone who's distanced from it. And I would say my opinion is that he is not as good a broadcaster as he was a head coach, and he was a really average head coach.
Good.
I think that I think that there are certainly some criticisms that you could make of Amari, but not those.
Right.
I think that when he came to Dallas, when the Raiders traded him, the book was that he dropped the ball all the time. Well, he didn't drop the ball all the time. He dropped a couple, but he was no worse than third on the team in drops. I think he was lower than that. So that rap was wrong. And I think that there were a couple of occasions this past year in 2019 that I think that people kind of looked at each other and said, why wasn't he more dominant in certain stages of certain games? This is how I would summarize Amari Cooper, and none of it includes anything that Rex Ryan said. I think that he might be one of these guys who is such a good athlete that he's like a thoroughbred that has to be 100% in his own mind to be able to be effective and play. I've known a lot of athletes in many sports like that, baseball, basketball, and sometimes it's you sometimes get almost as much over a long period of time from someone with less talent because they will play through stuff that a more talented, sensitive guy might not be able to play through. I'm not saying that's Cooper, but I am saying there were a couple of games that there were some things you'd have liked to have seen him be a little more active, a little more evident, and certainly for that amount of money. I hate using the money because we're not paying the money. What the hell do we care?
Right.
I will say this. I haven't seen all the receivers who've ever played for Dallas. I've only been doing this 42 years. So I don't know when he's clearly a top 10 receiver in the league. His talent shows you that. Watch him run routes. He is intelligent and cerebral. The guy understands things about how his opponent is defending him and what the route concept allows and how the quarterback likes to deliver it that a lot of receivers can't quite get to figuring out. And in addition, he is the antithesis of most leading wide receivers, most of whom are attention-grabbing, look at me, jump up and down, and some of those. And one of the hey, Michael Irvin is a guy I love in my heart, and Michael was a great teammate. Nobody wanted to win more, but that was Michael. It kind of still is. Now, there have been others who didn't have Irvin's work ethic or talent to back it up, but none of that is Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper would be just as happy not to talk at all, but when it's time to talk, he will offer thoughtful responses to things. Very unusual. I think he's one of the most intelligent receivers that they have ever had. And I think if Rex Ryan had ever been as good a head coach as Amari Cooper is a wide receiver, he wouldn't have been in the position to make those comments on ESPN.
Great answer.
Dak is, I don't know what the franchise tag means. You'd like to explain it to us. I know he's done well. The quarterback never does good enough. Explain a little bit about the franchise tag and how they worked with him.
The collective bargaining agreement allows for each team to have one tag that they can put on any one player, except in the last year when they can use two, when they can use what they call a franchise tag and a transition tag. That was why it was important to the players to get this CBA agreed to before they got into free agency.
Okay.
So there was one tag, and then if you tag a guy, there are two types of franchise tags, one of which pays the player at the average of, I believe it's the top 5 at his position in the league. And if it's the lower kind of tag, it allows for offers from other teams, which, if matched, bring back proscribed levels of compensation. Or there's the one that Dallas used on Prescott, which is the exclusive franchise tag, which means you're here. You can't take any other offers, and we are committed to paying you the top average of the top 5 at your position as for 1 year. This is what Washington did with the quarterback who is now in Minnesota, Cousins, and they did that twice, which is the most you can do. Actually, there's a technical way you can do it a third time, but you don't want to. But the players and their agents have come to see the application of a tag as opposed to agreement on a long-term contract. The players and their agents have come to see the application of the tag as an insult. I've been alive 70 years now, waiting for someone to insult me that bad.
Yeah,
and
right.
But they see it as a lack of commitment. But Dallas has no lack of commitment to Dak Prescott. He's got a good, smart agent who's trying to figure out a way to get him the most possible guaranteed money. That's the key.
Yeah.
Guaranteed money, and at as few a number of years as they can, because every time you go into free agency, you hit another payday, and the money always goes up. So whenever Patrick Mahomes does his next contract, that's going to drive the top of the market up.
Okay.
And the Cowboys would like to get the deal with Prescott done beforehand, and the Prescott people would probably like to wait. And I think what partly complicates it is kind of like the head coach. The quarterback and the head coach, Wimp, I've said this for years and years, the quarterback and the head coach are judged really only by what they do after the season's over and the regular season. And so he's played 4 years. He was a fourth-round pick who was not supposed to even play his rookie year, let alone start, let alone win 16 games or 14 games, rather, whatever they won, 13-3. And so he has had 2 years where he's been in the playoffs, and I think he's won 2 playoff games. And he is now going to be paid the fourth-round pick, not the fourth pick, fourth-round pick, which is not his fault, but he's now going to be paid at a level that probably is going to be greater than the first 2 picks in the draft his year, Carson Wentz and the young fellow with the Rams. So, Jared Goff. So, good for him. Goff is, again, was the first pick in the draft and took him right to the Super Bowl. Wentz, the second pick in the draft, and built up a Super Bowl winning team, even though he's hurt and didn't play. They've made no bones about how much they love Dak Prescott. And they should. They love him as a person. He's an even better person than he is a player. He's a tremendous leader, and he's now the face of the franchise. And they're going to have to figure something out. And they will. I really believe they will. I do think that they would like to have gotten something done with him and put the tag on Amari Cooper, because if you had done that, and I think they wanted to do that, then Cooper's still going to get paid big money. And then all the questions that people ask about where was he in this game and where was he in that game, well, now you would have another full year to evaluate him, and then you could make a long-term commitment to him. But they weren't able to get a deal done with Prescott, and they know what Cooper's meant to him, so they did the long-term deal with Cooper. And so what the exclusive tag means is that Prescott is going to be here for this coming year, and then they're going to have to go through it all again unless they get a long-term deal done. And I will add this, that I think that they all, and particularly the club, dodged a bullet in a screwy, unhappy way with this social lockdown that we're in. Because if this had been a normal year, frequently players who are under the tag choose, unless they've signed the tag, which he hasn't, they frequently choose not to come to the so-called voluntary off-season camps, OTAs and mini camps. And I think that way he'd have been well within his rights. DeMarcus Lawrence did that a couple of years ago. I think that would have been a really bad look for the quarterback with a new coaching staff coming in and the face of the franchise. That would have created some real tension, and none of that has happened because there aren't any OTAs, and there won't be very much, if any, of any kind of an off-season program on the field. Gives them a little bit more time. They've got to agree to a long-term contract by, I think it's the 15th of July, or he has to play under the tag this year. And nobody wants that just because of the uncertainty for the future. But that's kind of what it means.
That's so interesting and so good, Barry.
And something you said there early in that was the guaranteed money. You know, the NBA, those contracts for those guys, those big, they're all guaranteed. Football is
all guaranteed.
Yeah, football
they're all guaranteed.
Not.
And
yeah,
right.
Explain
and the same thing, pretty much, Barry, as you know. The same thing's pretty much true with baseball.
Yeah,
those contracts are guaranteed. So football's just, frankly, had a worse union. And
it amazes to me they can't get that changed. I mean, football is the most violent sport. When your career's over, you're banged up. Talk to us about those contracts and why haven't they been able to get that changed?
Well, you know, my opinion, my guess is because the lifespan is so short for a player. I mean, 9 years, 8, 9. Look at Luke Kuechly, 9 years. And it felt like he was here for about 10 minutes. And those careers are so short that I don't think players really want to, A, they love the game, and they don't want to miss any opportunities to play the game, and B, they don't want to miss the money. You know, baseball partly got to where it is by being willing to, they missed the World Series. They were willing to miss a season, and players were willing to not play. And I think in the NBA, I think they're probably pretty much in the same case. Those players can go all over the world and play anywhere. They wouldn't make the same money for the same time, but there'd be a lot of public pressure for NBA players to get paid. Football, where are they going to go? They don't have really an option. And because the window of playing is so short, I just don't think those players are willing to. Really, that's the worker. And I'm in a union. I'm not in a union state, but I'm in a union. And all you have to do is read your history of the country. The unions exist for the times when conditions are so overbearingly bad that they have to have some way to stand up to the people who own the businesses. And then the pendulum was all that way for one period of time, and then the only power that the workers have is to band together and try to swing it back the other way. And then it probably went too far the other way. So everything, it's best when it's in the middle, but I think it's really hard for union leadership in football to convince players to not play. They don't have that many opportunities to play anyway. So and when you peel the onion, I think that's basically why their union has not been as good. And look, this vote was close on this CBA, but the overwhelming number of players, I mean, it's not too different from our society. I mean, the very top paid ones, they're in gravy. They wake up in gravy, and there's nothing bad can happen to them. But the majority of them are hoping that they will play for 4 years and get a pension, and get medical care taken care of for the rest of their lives. That's a difficult vote to get for a union, I think.
Yeah, that.
I really appreciate you being on. One other thing, of course, the talk around here is Tua, which is nothing to you. But is it going to be any surprises for Dallas in their draft, or I don't know what you keep mentioning or not, or any thoughts as to what they might need before we let you go.
Oh yeah, they need everything. They need damn near everything. It was really interesting to me. You know, as you well know, you can find mock drafts that have him going anywhere from second to somewhere in the teens. I just read a Chicago Tribune draft this morning that had him not going had Miami passing on him until their second pick. I think it was somewhere down in the teens. Quarterback is probably the one thing Dallas is not looking at in the early rounds, the first 2 days, I think, and I'm not sure they would take a tight end in the first 2 rounds. I don't know if they might take one in the 3rd round, the second day on Friday. They have a screaming, desperate need for a cornerback. And, you know, if they take an Alabama player, it won't be a big surprise. The biggest question would be which one.
Yeah.
They need a cornerback or 3. Byron Jones, their best corner, got the biggest contract for a cornerback in the league as a free agent to Miami. So they've got to replace him. They need a safety. They're one of their better safeties, who a lot of people were down on here anyway. I wasn't, but a lot of folks were. Jeff Heath went to the Raiders, so they need a safety. They need it. You know, Robert Quinn led them in sacks, and they didn't re-sign him. The Bears gave him a huge deal, so they definitely need a pass rusher, and they need a wide receiver, because if they lost Randall Cobb, who had an outstanding year, and he went to Houston, and so now you've got Cooper and Michael Gallup, who did lead the team in drops, who's in his 3rd year. Now, Gallup looks like he's got a chance to be a star, but if either one of those guys gets hurt, you haven't got a lot behind him. So when it gets to their pick at 17, if that's where they stay, Wimp, then the question becomes, is the best wide receiver who's there at 17? Like, I think you can flip a coin from what I can gather between Judy and Lamb from Oklahoma. And,
okay.
You know, I've seen them both play, and if you told me that I could have Judy, I'd take him tomorrow and not ask any questions.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be a great player. But what about Ruggs? And I think the question that you ask yourself when you get down there is the best wide receiver available? How does he compare as a football player with the best defensive end and the best cornerback? And then part of the answer is, well, if we don't take this guy here, then when we pick again at 51, if we don't make a trade and add a pick, then what's likely to be there? Now, there's probably more wide receiver talent and depth in this draft than there is in many, many years, and that would lead you away from thinking that they would pick a wide receiver at 17, except if there's a guy who they think's a great player. I can't imagine Judy or Lamb, either one, getting that down that far. But if for some reason they did, well, I don't know how you get better by passing up great players. I mean, when you coached, would you not recruit a great player because you had a starter at his position and take a lesser player at a different position because I already got me a power forward. I don't need that guy who's going to be an All-American and probably lead the country in No, you don't get better passing up great players. So I think a lot of it for them is going to depend on what happens in front of them. But what do they need? They need everything.
Well, we sure do appreciate you being on. I tell you, this has been one heck of an interview. I appreciate it so much.
Brad, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Anytime for you.
And don't ever let him drive. You did learn that after the first time you rode with him, right?
Well, yeah, that is true. That part is true.
Yeah. Thanks, Brad.
All right, thank you guys. Have a great